Ukraine isn't just surviving, it's inventing its way to the front of modern warfare. Outgunned and outnumbered, Ukrainian forces have responded with a wave of battlefield ingenuity that's as bizarre as it is effective. From makeshift drone factories to Frankenstein-style unmanned vehicles on land, sea, and air, Ukraine has turned necessity into a full-blown innovation engine. Some of these weapons are outright wild, and they're working. When Russia launched its full-scale invasion in February 2022, drones were already in military use, but they were either massive and expensive like the MQ-9 Reaper or unarmed reconnaissance tools like the DJI Mavic. Most were produced in top-down, tightly controlled defense contracts. Ukraine changed all of that. It saw the drone not just as a tool, but as a lifeline, and by rewriting the rules of drone warfare, it's now leading the charge. In 2024 alone, Ukraine produced over 2.2 million FPV drones and 100,000 long-range ones. By the end of 2025, that number could soar to 5 million, and President Zelensky says it could hit 8 million with enough support. Let's dive into how this underground tech revolution is unfolding and explore the most bizarre and brilliant weapons Ukraine has unleashed on the battlefield. A significant part of this drone output is produced by established industrial enterprises like Viri and Skyfall. Viri mass-produced the Molfar FPV drone, which has become ubiquitous on the front lines and a key factor in holding Russian progress on the ground. Skyfall produces the larger Vampire strike drone, nicknamed Baba Yaga by the Russians, the name of a fairy tale witch. It also produces the smaller Shrike FPV drone, which has been used extensively for nighttime kamikaze raids due to its nocturnal navigation features. However, these days, much of the production is being carried out not by industrial concerns, but in nondescript apartments, warehouses, and basements by smaller teams. In many cases, small groups of skilled technicians are assembling drones themselves from the constituent components and even 3D printing some of the components themselves right there on site. It's fertile ground for innovation, as we'll discover shortly, but sometimes the innovations don't happen on the workshop table, but on the battlefield itself. For instance, here's what one Ukrainian soldier on the front lines did when he ran out of explosive casings to make bombs to drop on Russians. He came up with an ingenious improvisation: an empty Pringles can. The incident happened during the battle for Avdiivka in early 2024, the site of one of the bloodiest battles of the war for the Russians. Ukraine has long been attaching explosive devices to small drones originally built for commercial purposes. Then they navigate these drones above enemy positions and drop bombs right onto them. Sometimes, as we'll soon see, these bombs can pack a serious punch, and sometimes they're smaller, like grenades. Often, soldiers on the front lines assemble the grenades themselves, right there in the trenches, by stuffing metal grenade casings with a fixture of sulfate and plastic explosive. That's exactly what Vadim Adamov was doing on this fateful day, until his unit ran out of casings. Undeterred, he polished off the remaining chips in the tubed Pringles can he'd been snacking from and got to work refilling it. And it worked. He attached the Pringles bomb to his DJI Mavic drone. Then, with the help of neighboring drone spotting units, he flew the drone above a Russian armored vehicle and dropped the Pringles can on top of it. The hit disabled the vehicle, which was then finished off by additional drone-dropped bombs. We don't know what flavor the chips originally inside the Pringles can were, but by the time it reached the Russians, it was extra hot. What's more, the armored vehicle costs hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars to make. In contrast, a DJI Mavic cost no more than a few $1,000s. The explosives Adamov used cost about $100, and the Pringles only added about $1.50 to the total cost. But it's not just improvised grenades from modified commercial drones that Ukraine is dropping onto Russian troops and armored vehicles. They've also figured out an innovative way to deliver much heavier payloads onto better armored targets like tanks and fortifications, dropping Soviet-era landmines from heavy-lift drones. Bizarre as it may sound, the TM-62 anti-tank landmine, designed to be buried underground, is now being dropped by Ukraine onto tanks from high above it. These disc-shaped mines weigh about 22 pounds, making them too heavy to be carried effectively by Mavics and similar commercial quadcopters used by Ukraine. So Ukraine is using its fleet of heavy bombers. This is another warfare first for Ukraine. Before this conflict, no heavy bomber multicopter had ever been used in war. Ukraine's heavy bomber drones are predominantly locally made hexacopters or octocopters, assembled from imported components such as the aforementioned Vampire or the Kazan, which translates to bat. The Vampire is capable of carrying up to 33 pounds over 4 miles or 22 pounds for 6 miles, so it's perfect for carrying the TM-62 landmine or mortar bombs. It's also equipped with thermal imaging for night attacks, as seen in a CNN news clip, where a Vampire destroyed a Russian tank with 3 82mm mortar bombs. The E-620 Kazan is also optimized for night attacks and has a maximum payload of 44 pounds for short-range attacks, also perfect for dropping TM-62s and mortar bombs onto Russian gear. These much larger drones are also much pricier. At $15,000 to $30,000 each, they cost as much as 10 times more than a Mavic quadcopter. But of course, they have the ability to carry more powerful payloads to destroy more hardened targets. Mortar bombs are even more effective against armored vehicles and tanks than Pringles cans jam-packed with explosives. But bunkers and concrete emplacements require something even more powerful than that, and that's where the TM62s come in handy. They're powerful, cheap, and Ukraine has a large stockpile of them. They're also more effective than mortars against fortifications, not just because they're roughly 3 times the weight, but because of the way they explode. A mortar bomb is primarily designed to spray anti-personnel shrapnel, so it's mainly composed of metal with at most 20% explosive, whereas 80% of the TM62's weight is TNT or RDX explosive. Still, the mines needed further Ukrainian innovation to convert them from landmines into air mines. In earlier versions, a hole was cut in the mine casing so that a hand grenade fuse could be directly inserted into the mine's explosive. The mine is then simply dropped from a tray suspended under the drone. But the technology has evolved, and the mine is now fitted with an improvised tail fin made from a length of pipe and plastic water bottle so that it falls straight down, with a larger fuse positioned next to the tail. The mine is also now dropped via a sling system, which makes it more accurate than the earlier version. In addition to dropping mines onto fortifications and even tanks, Ukraine also uses its heavy bomber drones to remotely mine roads and fields behind enemy lines. So Ukraine has even found ways to innovate using TM62s for purposes other than what they were originally intended. But Ukraine's innovations in the art of drone bombing are dwarfed by its new approach to blowing Russian equipment and troops up by smashing kamikaze drones into them. At its most basic level, Ukraine's conversion of commercial FPV or first-person view drones into precision-guided death machines has completely changed the face of frontline warfare. Sure, both Ukraine and Russia are still pounding each other with traditional weapons, artillery, tanks, mortars and the like, but the battlefields in Donetsk have become dominated by FPV drones on both sides. Specialized FPV drone operators are now prized possessions of the Ukrainian armed forces. The drones themselves are generally handmade, modified racing drones with an RPG-7 anti-tank rocket warhead or fuel bomb attached. They're guided in real time by the operators using video goggles and a live video feed from the drone. The drones roam the front lines, their buzzing sound spreading fear into the Russian ranks hiding below, because when one spots you, you're toast. Once in range, the FPV drone simply rams into its target, detonating on impact. The beauty of these agile drones is that they can strike with pinpoint precision. That makes them excellent weapons for taking out expensive, heavily armored equipment like tanks or flamethrower systems. They can target vulnerable spots like engine decks and open hatches with extreme accuracy, enabling them to take out expensive tanks and the like that would normally require expensive, high-explosive guided missiles. If you're Russian President Vladimir Putin, it's going to hurt watching $400 hobby drones taking out multiple multi-million-dollar T-90 tanks in a single day. Indeed, watching the destruction caused by FPV drones has become an important psychological aspect of the war. The live feed transmitted by the FPV drone's camera is captured by the operator and generally continues until the moment of detonation. These videos are then published online, which has led to thousands of videos of the last moments of Russian soldiers and vehicles before they get blown to smithereens being published online. That has a powerful morale-boosting effect on the Ukrainian forces and population in general, and precisely the opposite effect on the Russians. This effect is even more pronounced when Ukraine smashes much nastier stuff than anti-tank warheads into them. One of the nastiest is Ukraine's use of airburst munitions, essentially flying claymore mines that shower the enemy with shrapnel from above. The basic idea is that instead of flying an FPV drone or small quadcopter rigged with explosives directly into a target, the payload is fitted with an airburst fuse. It's then detonated above the target, raining a hail of deadly metallic chunks over the area. The claymore mine, also known as the clacker, is a directional anti-personnel mine with massive explosive power. It consists of a plastic housing containing an explosive charge, approximately 700 steel ball bearings, and a detonation device. Unlike a conventional landmine, the claymore can be activated by remote control or by a booby-trap tripwire firing system. It's also directional, shooting a wide pattern of metal balls into a kill zone. The claymore fires steel balls out to about 300 feet in a 60-degree arc in front of the device. It's used primarily in ambushes as an anti-infiltration device against enemy infantry and against unarmored vehicles. Now the Ukrainians have developed a drone-based flying claymore, directional airburst warheads mounted on FPV drones or quadcopters that concentrate the blast into a forward-facing cone, sending shrapnel in a focused arc rather than in all directions. This Ukrainian innovation has proven to be highly effective at clearing trenches and foxholes, terrifying and destroying the Russian troops inside them. In one viral clip of the bomb in action, a Ukrainian FPV drone circled 2 Russian soldiers in the open and then detonated its directional charge, peppering them with fragments and killing them both instantly. This can be highly demotivating for Russian troops on the front lines. Nowhere is safe when that buzzing sound above you can suddenly turn into a deadly wall of fragmentation. Still, faced with a choice between the flying claymore and the next Ukrainian drone-based innovation will feature, Russian troops would probably choose the flying claymore. We're talking about the so-called dragon drones, a fitting name that evokes the terror of those mythical fire-breathing monsters. These drones rain down molten thermite, a chemical mixture that burns at over 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit, enough to melt through metal and ignite almost anything it touches. Ukrainian units have equipped drones with thermite charges that ignite and spew white-hot metal onto Russian targets. They've proven particularly effective against the makeshift anti-drone devices like cages and sandbags that Russia has been forced to attach to their so-called turtle tanks to fend off Ukraine's drone attacks. The tactical goal of these terrifying weapons is to negate these types of armor upgrades and to flush troops out of concealed positions by literally setting them on fire. Even worse for the Russians, there's no easy defense or fire extinguisher to put out thermite fires. Once one explodes, Russian soldiers have literally seconds before being consumed by a 4,000-degree fire. There are two ways these dragon drones are used. Usually, thermite charges are deployed by FPV drones that either drop them directly onto their targets or hover to disperse the burning material, turning even lightly armored vehicles into fireballs. They've also been spotted hovering over Russian tanks and pouring thermite onto them, setting them ablaze. Either way, the fear factor that these drones create is enough to cause panic in the Russian ranks, without anything even needing to be scorched. As mentioned at the start of the video, it's not just in the air that Ukraine is pioneering the use of unmanned vehicles. The Ukrainians have also created small, unmanned ground vehicles, or UGVs, which act as kamikaze land drones. Mounted on either tracks or wheels and remote-controlled, they trundle across no man's land on the front lines until they reach the Russian positions, and then detonate the explosives packed onto them. Able to travel over rough terrain, they've proven highly effective at crawling under tanks and blowing them up, driving into trenches and foxholes and clearing them, and even blowing up bridges. They've been so successful that several companies in Ukraine have begun mass-producing them. The most well-known of these is the Ratel S, or honey badger, made by Ratel. It can carry up to 77 pounds at a maximum speed of 15 miles per hour and has a range of around 3.5 miles. It can run for 40 to 50 minutes at an average speed, or for up to 2 hours at a slower speed, according to the manufacturer. Like the air-dropped bombs we discussed earlier, they've been spotted in the wild carrying both 82mm mortar bombs and TM62 anti-tank mines. And just like aerial drones, they're controlled via a first-person view system by an operator who wears goggles. The Ratel S was developed following input from Ukraine's 120th Reconnaissance Battalion, which wanted a drone capable of remotely delivering a large warhead and which could resist Russia's electromagnetic interference. The result is a UGV that can quietly approach Russian positions, overcome obstacles at up to 8 to 10 inches high, operate effectively on sandy terrain, and kill lots of Russians. Ukraine also uses UGVs for logistics, primarily to carry supplies and ammunition to troops right on the front line. But apparently there are a variety of other explosive UGVs also on the way. In March 2024, Brave One told Business Insider that it had looked at around 140 UGV ideas, tested 50 of them in combat situations, and approved 14 of those 50. As with most Ukrainian battlefield innovations, the Russians have started copying them, and different versions are increasingly being seen used by both sides. In some areas, Ukraine has copied and improved on Russian innovations, like FPV drones controlled via fiber optic cables, and building netting over important transport routes to protect traffic from drone attacks. However, one innovation where Ukraine is miles ahead of Russia is in the field of explosive naval drones. These uncrewed surface vessels, or USVs, sometimes called sea drones, are fast, remote-controlled boats packed with hundreds of pounds of explosive. Guided by cameras and GPS, operators can steer these floating bombs from distant positions into high-value naval targets like Russian ships and bridges. Ukraine has a variety of USVs in service, but the most well-known are probably the Magura V5, introduced in 2023, and later versions, the Magura V6P and V7, the latter of which can shoot down aircraft. Magura stands for Maritime Autonomous Guard Unmanned Robotic Apparatus. These naval drones are multi-purpose, used for missions as diverse as surveillance, reconnaissance, patrolling, search and rescue, mine countermeasures, maritime security, and combat missions. The V5 has a length of 18 feet, weighs less than 2,200 pounds, has a maximum speed of 48 miles per hour, and an operational range of up to 500 miles. The main armament can be an explosive charge of up to 660 pounds or a modified R-73 air-to-air missile, which can be used to target enemy vessels or aircraft. Few Ukrainian weapons have caused as much damage, chaos, expense, and reputational damage to Russia as these sea drones. Back in 2024, Magura V5s made global headlines when they were used to sink 2 Russian vessels, the Cesar Kunikov landing ship and several Tunets speedboats. Ukraine has also used uncrewed surface drones in multiple successful strikes on the Kerch Bridge linking Crimea to the Russian mainland, though some of those, like the July 2023 attack, have been attributed to the Sea Baby drones rather than the Magura. These hits damaged key support structures and disrupted military logistics across the region. Then, in an unprecedented naval operation, Ukraine's Group 13 Special Forces used Magura V7 sea drones equipped with AIM-9 air-to-air missiles to shoot down 2 Russian Su-30 fighter jets, one over the Black Sea near Novorossiysk and another over occupied Crimea. Each jet was valued at roughly $50 million. It marks the first known instance in history of uncrewed sea drones destroying combat aircraft. Eventually, unable to effectively counter Ukraine's USVs, Russia was forced to tuck its tail between its legs and relocate the entire Black Sea fleet from its long-standing base in Sevastopol, Crimea, to less hazardous waters further to the east. This is not only highly embarrassing for Russia, but has also greatly reduced Russia's ability to attack Ukraine with sea-based missiles from the Black Sea. That's made a big contribution to Ukraine's continuing ability to prevent Russia from making further inroads into the oblasts it partially occupies, Kherson and Zaporizhia, as well as the strategically important Odessa and Mykolaiv areas. There are many more Ukrainian battlefield innovations to share with you, invisible soldiers, anyone. But in the interest of brevity, we'll save them for future videos. And make sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out when we release them. Thank you, as always, for watching.